Good evening, Boney.
Hey, Doug, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Nice to talk to you.
Sorry I'm late. I had a little technical issue over here.
I know that feeling. Whenever I do an interview or anything like that, I always worry about, am I going to get an issue?
Yeah, you know, I don't use the Skype too much, and apparently I was offline. I didn't know there was a separate thing you had to hit, even though you logged in, so...
Yeah, I know. I'm exactly the same. I'm not too good with Skype and that, so well, I'll join you. One thing in common then.
Yeah. Well, we're here now.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks for joining us on Sound Fusion Radio.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's brilliant. Now, I wanted to start off on that, chatting to you and everything, really, about your influences and everything, because I've just been looking, obviously, through a lot of your past, and found that as you grew up and that, you were listening to Motown.
Yes. I loved R&B music from the first time I heard it, you know. And back in the old days, you used to hear a lot of different kinds of music on the radio. It didn't matter which format you were listening to, and it was all mixed up. But I always gravitated to, you know, of course, Stevie Wonder and the Jackson 5 and Marvin Gaye, and you know, then of course I got into Aretha and Curtis Mayfield and Earth, Wind and Fire and all that stuff. You know, just the R&B music in general just really got me excited.
It's funny you saying that, because that is exactly how I felt as I grew up, because I'm 3 years older than you, and as I grew up, my brothers and that used to bring home loads of records and that, and it was always the Motown records, the soul, the R&B style records that I gravitated to, and obviously grew up through the 70s listening to all that type of stuff before I started to really get into jazz. Was that the same for you?
Exactly. You know, and I mean, I picked up the saxophone when I was 13, but I mean, when I was 10, but I didn't get excited about it till I was 13 or 14, because that's when Grover Washington Jr. came out, and a lot of the jazz musicians were starting this fusion, you know, movement, and sort of bringing in elements of the other kind of pop and R&B and different kinds of music that I loved. So that's when I started to get into jazz, and, you know, just still carrying that tradition on today, hopefully.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I see, one of your influences was Grover Washington Jr. What was that? Was that from the sort of like the Reed Seed LP, Wine Light, or was it before that with like Inner City Blues?
Mr. Magic, I think, was the first one I heard. I imagine that was 1975. And that song and that whole record, you know, was really just like the aha moment for me, that you could have this beautiful saxophone sound and improvising very creatively, but over a funky sort of go-go R&B beat, and with a wonderful melody. And that's just to me, that's sort of like when my you know, serious interest in music as a sax player got really sort of awoken.
It's funny, because to say you're saying that, to say that is the one instrument I would have loved to learn to play, was the saxophone. Either saxophone or bass was always what I would have loved to have played, but you obviously fulfilled your ambition where I never did.
Well, I do. I still love it. You know, all these years later, every day I'm sort of at it, trying to get a little bit better.
Yeah, I was to say, I see, obviously, with your career and everything, you've obviously had a long apprenticeship before you actually went solo and started doing your own thing. Can you tell us a bit about, obviously, your apprenticeship, as I will say, regarding working with people like Prince and Morris Day, Randy Crawford and Bobby Caldwell and people like that?
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, I sort of decided I wanted to become a professional musician, and then I had to get a real job. I was delivering pizzas and struggling to break into the business, and I heard about Morris Day. The Time had just broken up. This was 1985, and I went and auditioned to be the keyboard player in his band, and they hired me, and that sort of led me into a 7-year career of being a sideman and working with, as you said, the Randy Crawford, the Isley Brothers for 2 years, Bobby Caldwell, Tina Marie, Sheena Easton, you know, the list list goes on and on and on, and just bouncing from gig to gig, and paying my dues, and sort of going to music school in a way, and learning how to be an entertainer, and all those wonderful things I got out of that. I was always very grateful that I had that experience.
Yeah, I think that's the trouble these days. Everybody now wants their 15 minutes of fame and don't really pay their dues like that anymore, do they?
It's amazing, and I hope that has something to do with the fact that I've now managed to maintain a solo career for over 20 years, whereas a lot of these people that, maybe get known through, one of these contest shows, and they don't have any idea how to actually be an artist when they get there, those careers don't seem to last quite as long.
No, obviously the longevity there with you yourself, was it 14 LPs now?
Yeah, the new one is number 14, which is a big number. I mean, I'm impressed.
Now, as I said, I noticed again that you toured with Randy Crawford, and
Yes.
I gather that's where you got your name from.
Exactly. I was playing with Randy in 1986. This was actually my second professional job ever. It was an amazing band. It was Tony Maiden from Rufus, the guitar player and singer from Rufus, was the musical director that put that band together. And the keyboard player, Wayne Lindsay, who's actually now the keyboard player on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno here in the United States. He was a very funny guy, always joking around. And we spent a lot of time in Oslo, Norway, and just Scandinavia in general was one of her big, areas of fame. So we were there all the time, and everything cost a fortune over there. So I said to Wayne one day, just joking around, "Oh man, everything costs so much, I just won't eat for a couple days." And he said, "Oh, you'll get all skinny. I'll have to start calling you Boney James or something like that." And I said, "Do not call me Boney James, whatever you do." And of course, that's how you get a nickname. He sort of called me that just to mess with me, and people for some reason loved it, and it just kind of caught on. I couldn't stop it.
Yeah, it's funny you're saying about Norway and Sweden. That there is quite a lot of big jazz influence out there, because I know I've picked up quite a few LPs that come from that area.
Interesting. Well, I know Randy was very popular there. Oh, we toured the UK quite a bit as well,
Oh, well, I must have come and saw you then, because I went to several Randy Crawford gigs round about that time.
No kidding. I was playing keyboards and a little bit of sax over there on stage, right, for almost 4 or 5 years off and on.
Right, yeah. So I probably have seen you live then and not realised it.
Yeah, but, on stage I probably was not called Boney James till the very end.
Now, I see you say, like you said, you paid your dues, obviously playing with other bands and everything like that. I've seen one of the other bands was the Isley Brothers, which unfortunately we never got to see over here in the UK because they don't like flying, I gather.
Yeah. I think we did go to Japan once during that time. Maybe the money was something they couldn't turn down. I don't know.
But it wasn't until, was it 1992 that you were noticed and by Paul Brown, and obviously your career took off from there.
Yeah, I mean, I had been struggling I really had gotten frustrated with the life of a sideman for the last few years there. I really had started writing my own songs and really wanted people to hear my music and to not just spend my life recreating tracks that other people had made. So sort of trying to beat that door down, and then in 91 I met Paul Brown. He and I were on the road with Bobby Caldwell at the time. Paul was just mixing front of house, and I was just a member of the band, but we both wanted to do more. Paul wanted to produce, and I wanted to be an artist, and we got together and made that first CD, Trust, which came out on a very small label, Spindletop Records, and didn't have a lot of distribution, but got noticed on the radio. The whole smooth jazz, and although they called it new adult contemporary at the time, radio thing was taking off here, and they noticed me, and the record was as big a hit as that label was able to support, but a big enough of a hit that Warner Brothers noticed me, and I was able to jump over to the big leagues in 1994.
Yeah, it's funny because that first LP you had with Warner Brothers, Backbone, I actually I've got that on a cassette.
Right.
And of course, when I got that out, my daughter looked at me and said, "What's that?" They're so used to MP3s these days, just like a cassette.
I know.
Yeah, and it's still got all the top of wow and flutter to it, when I listen to it, I think, So it's maybe having to go back and repurchase it on iTunes.
Yeah, I mean, the technology certainly has changed. I mean, I still miss LPs, though. Honestly, I think that as music has gotten smaller in a physical sense, it's become less important in people's lives, and I think it has something to do with it.
Yes, it's funny you saying that, because whenever I used to buy my LPs and that, I used to flip them over and always have a look to see who's performing on them and everything like that. Right. And I noticed on your LPs, you had one of the great percussionists with you a lot of the time, Paulina Di Costa.
Yes, I love Paulinho and Lenny Castro. Those are the two, I think, best percussionists alive today, and I love using both of them on all of my records. It's amazing. To me, percussion, we call it ear candy, and I just love what it adds to the music.
Yeah, it's just funny because whenever I bought an LP and I saw the name Paulina Di Costa, I think that's a good LP. I'm gonna have to buy it. You also done a couple of Christmas LPs.
Well, I had done one for Warner Brothers, and I think what happened was, as I did the first one before I was such a big star, and then I had sold a few more records by the time Warner Brothers actually re-released the first one to try and capitalize on my newfound popularity. And then when I made the jump over to Concord Records, they were like, "Well, we want one too." So it wasn't really at my instigation; it was at the label's instigation to do the second record. But I got to tell you, every time I go and do a Christmas record, it's an awful lot of fun. I do love the Christmas music, and at Christmas time, my wife and I, we like to put on the Christmas records. So to have the opportunity to try and give my individual stamp to those songs, it's always been a lot of fun doing it. Although I don't know, I think I might have tapped out my ideas for Christmas music at this point.
The association with Warner Brothers, how many years did that actually last?
I think it was 13 or 14 years. It was unusually long. It was through 3 or 4 regimes of executives over there. There was a lot of turbulence at that label over the years. People getting fired, and new presidents coming in, and at the end there, it was just finally couldn't last it out anymore. The label was changing so much. They had really dropped all of their jazz department and only kept me, and just didn't feel like there was any place for me moving forward there. So simultaneously, Concord had put out the Genius Loves Company Ray Charles record, and they were sort of the hot new kid on the block in terms of this kind of music. So it seemed like a great idea to move over there, and it's going extremely well.
Yeah, because it must be, because I noticed the beat has been #1 for quite some time.
Yeah, the 7th week, actually just found out yesterday. We're still #1, so it's a wonderful thing. Very excited.
Excellent. Now, let's say, before you obviously went over to Concord Records, so one of my favourite LPs is the LP Shake It Up with Rick Braun. And as I say, what a brilliant trumpet player he is.
He's fantastic, and the thing about Rick is that, we met on a session for another artist many years ago, and that same day we turned to each other and said, we sound good together. There's something special that happens when we're playing unison, and we seem to really know where the other guy's going to go before it happens. So it's a unique thing when we play together as well.
Yeah, it's funny because I was looking on a review about the Beat LP, and on there, the guy that's written it has actually said that he feels that the two of you are like Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and the pair intend to bring out mostly the pure jazz moments in each other.
That's interesting. Yeah, well, Rick definitely has more of a traditional bebop sort of a background than I do. I'm coming very much from the R&B tradition, but I think that we each sort of pull each other in different directions when we're soloing together, and every time we've cut one of these songs, it's just live, standing in the room side by side, not overdubs at all. So it does change things in a nice way.
What sort of reaction do you get from people, obviously, with that type of like R&B background? Because I say there's too many people out there who are like jazz police and think there's only like one style of jazz music. But to me, jazz is about innovating and also trying out new things, but not forgetting its roots.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, I often say to people that are look down their noses at contemporary jazz or jazz that has a fusion element, and I say, I thought jazz was all about freedom, man, but I try and not fight that fight and just stay out of it and do my thing. But in terms of the R&B community has been very accepting of me. I mean, I've had a number of hits at the R&B radio format. I've got the new Raheem DeVaughn single, which is actually doing very well over here now, and I've always felt a lot of acceptance from the R&B community. I'm sort of an honorary member, hopefully.
Yeah, because I recently watched a documentary on Public Service America TV, which we get over here, all about jazz. And the actual program was absolutely brilliant. But what annoyed me, it got up to 1967, and then it totally ignored the jazz fusion movement completely, right, and then jumped up to modern times. And I was quite annoyed with that part of it, because I was thinking, well, that was, to me, was what got me influenced and got me into jazz music, right, was that fusion, this, like you were saying, the mixture of people like Earth, Wind and Fire and people like that, and that's what with my show I try to bring to it, is I will play everything from Louis Armstrong right the way up to like people like yourself. I will play what we call over here acid jazz, and obviously jazz fusion over here we always used to call it jazz funk, right, and I'd always want to try and bring different influences of jazz music, and that's when I've listened to your music and everything, hearing that R&B element put into it, and I'm just thinking that is so good. Not a lot of artists would have tried that. Well,
thank you. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't understand where this sort of reactionary kind of mindset comes from. I think a lot of people, not to cast aspersions, but some people, get into jazz because they think it makes them look cool, and there's some sort of unwritten code involved there, and it's all about appearances rather than just reacting emotionally to the music. And so all I know is what I like, and I've always loved this type of music that fuses contemporary elements with the wonderful, history of jazz. And, I think when you speak of Louis Armstrong, even most of the jazz from the 30s and 40s was much more of a pop-centered music, and jazz fans, traditional jazz fans don't look down their noses at that, yet the pop-centered music of today, they look down their noses at. So I don't understand it, but like I said, I try not to get into too many fights about it and just do my thing.
Yeah, I'll agree with you completely there. So you did a lot of work with Bobby Caldwell?
Yeah, Bobby's amazing. He's one of those, pop singer-songwriters that also has a great knowledge of jazz music and interesting chords and beautiful lyrics, and his repertoire is so deep and interesting musically. So when I got hired to do that gig, I was thrilled. A lot of saxophone in his music as well. So it was a great jumping off point for me to really develop as a performer and a soloist, and just to hang out with a super talented guy.
Yeah, because I say, my first sort of Bobby Caldwell songs I always remember was What You Won't Do for Love and Down for the Third Time, which to me was absolutely so classy at the time when they came out back in 1978.
Yeah, and Bobby, of course, another sort of blue-eyed soul guy. When that song What You Won't Do for Love came out, a lot of people thought he was black and were surprised when they actually saw him, and that's something I hear all the time too with my records. So
I see you also done some work with LaToya Luckett from Destiny's Child.
Yeah, I was very honored that she agreed to be on my last CD. On the Contact CD, she sang a song called When I Had the Chance, which my wife Lily actually wrote the lyrics for, and it was a sort of a medium hit for both of us. But I heard her first solo record on the radio. It was a song called, I think it was called, oh golly, it's slipping my mind. Anyway, I heard her first single a few years ago, and I said, wow, that's just amazing. Who is that? And found out she was one of the original members of Destiny's Child that had left the band. And so when I wrote this other song, I thought she'd be perfect for that, and we reached out to her management, and she agreed to do it, and it was a wonderful experience working with her.
Yeah, because I see that Contact was nominated for Best Contemporary Jazz Album of 2011 for the Soul Train Awards.
Yeah, that was exciting. Didn't win that time, though, unfortunately.
And also, as I say, you've had was it 3 Grammy-nominated LPs as well?
3 Grammy nominations, 2 for Best Pop Instrumental Album, and 1 for Best Traditional R&B Performance, which was exciting.
I'd say you're going back to the year 2000 when you did your collaboration with Rick Braun with Shake It Up. How did you feel about redoing Hugh Masekela's Grazing Me Grass? Because that was an absolute classic.
Yeah, well, that was one of the first songs that we talked about doing when we knew we were going to do the collaboration CD, just because it was a famous kind of pop, hit trumpet melody, and just, of course, one of our favorite songs growing up. It's just an incredible track, and there's the saxophone playing the harmony on there. So we thought, well, let's try and give this one an updated slant, and went into the studio live with the band, Paulinho, of course, on the cowbells, and a great band, and just played it down a few times and came up with this sort of slightly new arrangement. And that song has had incredible lasting stamina in terms of its popularity on the radio here. You can still hear it almost every day.
The Ride LP, the first LP that you had that sort of R&B influence brought into it?
No, I think it goes back a little further. Even on Backbone, there was a vocal song called Happy Home. I was with an R&B singer, not as famous, and Eric Benet collaborated with me on this Sweet Thing record. I think Ride was the most R&B. I worked with Jaheim, and he's a little bit tougher of a singer, and Dave Hollister actually did a track on there as well, and that one I think was my highest charting R&B single. I think I got up to number 5 on the R&B radio chart. So that was definitely the toughest record that I had put out. And we worked with the engineer Russell Elevato, who had worked with D'Angelo, and we tried to give it a little bit more of a New York kind of sound.
Because you were obviously brought up in New York until before you moved to Los Angeles. Did that sort of have an influence on your musical career, then actually working and, living and growing up in New York?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I moved to California when I was in my teens, and, I don't know how well I was formed in either sort of place. It's really just about what you kind of like to listen to, and there was definitely that whole sort of Philadelphia, New York sound in the early 2000s there, where D'Angelo and the Soulquarians and all that stuff. But that was just kind of something I really loved the way it sounded, and I want to try and get a little bit of that onto my record. So that was the main motive.
Because again, looking at again through your records and everything, the amount of people that you've actually collaborated with, people like George Duke, George Benson, Philip Bailey, Joe Sample. How do you feel about playing with some of those jazz greats as well?
It's one of those things where I just can hardly even believe that that's what's happened in my life, because I grew up idolizing all of those people that you mentioned, and Al Jarreau, so many of the, people that I grew up loving and have, graced my records with their performances, and I got to hang out with them in the studio, and to have the knowledge that they knew who I was and respected the music I was making is something that's almost hard to believe.
Because again, another thing I read in that, it's which somebody's written about you, and it said in a crowded field of 50,000 smooth jazz saxophonists, there's only a handful of people who would actually stand out, and Boney James is one of them. How do you feel about those type of words written about you?
I mean, it's humbling, but very gratifying. It's easy as a performer and a recording artist, or just as a human being, to have a sense of insecurity sometimes about what you're doing. So when people say nice things like that about you in the press, it's something you can say, okay, I guess it must not suck that bad.
Yeah, because I know listening to your music myself and everything is the fact that on some records your saxophone playing is so powerful, and yet on the next track you bring out that real slow soul, and it's just the softness comes out as well. So you can switch from both that really powerful saxophone to this very mellow saxophone, and that is a lot of saxophone players don't seem to be able to do that.
Well, thank you. I mean, I do love the sort of a whispery sound. I mean, that's something that, the saxophone to me is really just my voice, and I practice a lot, so I have control over it to get it to do what I want it to do. But when I'm really playing and in a good headspace, the saxophone almost doesn't exist, and I'm just trying to sing. And so to me, it's all about responding to the music and being in the song as opposed to on the song. And I do my best to really connect emotionally whenever I'm playing, and just get out of my own way and let the music come, and I don't usually put out a record until I'm at the point where I think, wow, that's pretty good. I like it. And at that point, I just have to trust that other people are going to like it too. And it seems like so far so good.
Yes, because I say the latest album, The Beat, there's some of the tunes on there. You've featured it's a lady, a UK lady, I gather,
yes,
called Natalie Stewart.
Yes. The Flow Assist. Well, she was half of a band called Flowetry with Marsha Ambrosius, who's actually gone on to be sort of a big solo star in the last year or two. But they had a couple of great records together as a duo, and I noticed her then and just sort of filed her way as someone I might want to work with someday. And I wrote this track, and I thought, wow, it just got a little bit of to me, it had a little bit of I don't know, like a Hotel Coast kind of flavor to it, and I thought it might want sort of a spoken word kind of thing, and then I thought of Natalie, because she's got her accent, and I just thought it would be a sort of a sexy, nice moment, and I sent her the track, and when it came back, I was couldn't have been more thrilled with the way it turned out. She added so much to it.
In 2010, you were involved in a car crash.
Yeah, that was a drag.
So somebody decided to rear-end you, I gather.
Yeah, I was driving home from the Newport Beach Jazz Festival. It had a great show. It was sort of, floating on a cloud, and got stuck in traffic on the freeway. And then seconds later, the car behind me didn't see that we'd all stopped, and just plowed into the back of my car. And his car caught on fire, and my face got smashed against the steering wheel. And it was a nightmare. One minute you're thinking what you're going to have for dinner, and the next minute you're on the way to the hospital. So, and my two teeth got pushed out, and luckily everything's fine. 3 years later, I'm back 100%. But there was a period there where it was, couldn't play at all, and then very difficult to get back into it. But it's all worked out okay. So
that never affected your actual playing then in the end?
In the end, it's fine. But I mean, there was an adjustment period, definitely. It was painful to play, and I had to change my embouchure a little bit, and switch to a softer reed. And, things have changed, but I've adjusted. Oh, yeah, definitely at first. I mean, and Grover and a lot of the music that was happening in that era, Ronnie Loss was another guy, and Wilton Felder from the Crusaders, and John Clemmer, these were all the sax players that I really, really loved when I was a kid. And, when you become a solo artist, and as I sort of grew up, it's a process of sort of letting go of your influences and trying to find what your sound is.
Yes, because that's the thing. You say your sound is very, very, very distinctive compared to the people you've just mentioned there. Mm-hmm. Because I absolutely love Ronnie Laws. As you say, he's one of my heroes, and I've seen him a few times in concert. And funny enough, recently up in Ronnie Scott's in London, I went and saw him.
Oh, great!
Absolutely brilliant. I was going to say to you, over here at the moment, we've got obviously a lot of jazz festivals going on during the summer. And is there any chance of you coming over here and doing anything for us?
I would love to, but I mean, so far it seems that the awareness of me in the UK is not at the same level that as it is here in the States. So haven't been turning down a lot of offers.
We'll have to try and remedy that one, won't we?
Yeah, man. I'll leave it up to you, man. Make some noise.
I'll have to bang the drum for you, I think.
Thank you so much.
I see you're married to a very famous actress.
Well, she's more of a working actress, but she did have a wonderful job for 15 years as one of the nurses on ER, and that's an amazing thing that she's achieved. And she's now trying to work into becoming a director, so very supportive of that. She's incredibly talented.
Yes, because I see that you've done some work for her on her soundtracks.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I wrote my first film score was to her recent film called Model Minority, which has done very, very well at festivals. In fact, I think she won a prize at the London Independent Film Festival just recently.
Oh, really? So how long have you been married now?
It's going to be 28 years this year. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, the LP, The Beat, what made you decide to record Barracuda?
Batucada, actually, is the pronunciation. I had always sort of flirted with the idea of doing a full-on Latin album, just to take some of my favorite Latin music and do all covers, but that idea just didn't really sit that well. So I thought, well, let me just do an arrangement of this one and see what happens. And as I started working on the track, I kind of changed the groove a little bit and gave it a little bit more of an R&B flavor. And at that point, I thought, oh, this is exciting. And I ended up writing a bunch of songs and did a cover of a Stevie Wonder, and all sort of in that kind of mash-up Latin R&B hybrid style. It's the music that makes you move, and it's very groove-oriented, and that's what I love about it. And of course, the chords and the melody are great too, but to me, it's so much about the percussion and the rhythm of it, and that's something that I thought it had in common with the R&B music, because a lot of that is about rhythm. So that's why I saw sort of a connection between the two.
Would you ever actually do a full type of Latin sounding LP?
You know, I might, although I tend to shy away from the big concept records. I mean, I like a record that has a little bit more of an eclectic quality to it. I think it's just more entertaining, and sometimes I feel like these concept records just feel a little bit too, you know, preconceived or you know, forced in a way. So I would never say never, you know, if I come up with a way of doing it that feels creative to me.
In addition to your Grammy nominations and that, what other awards have you been up for?
Well, I was nominated for an NAACP Image Award. I did win the Soul Train Award for my Sweet Thing CD, and that was exciting. And I think that's it.
Yeah, and we have got an absolutely brilliant producer, a lady called Anna, and I know she got in contact with you and got this arranged for us, and we much appreciate that you could come on the air and have a chat with us.
Well, it's completely my pleasure. I mean, as I said, I'd love to break into your area, so anything we can do to help is appreciated on our end.
Yes, because I say Concord Records have been very, very helpful to us, and yeah, I'd like to thank Concord Records for everything they've done for us. So yes, very, very, very appreciative of all that. It's very kind of you. Thank you very much.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Hope your tooth feels better.
Yeah, I know. I've got to wait a couple of days before I get to see the dentist, so I've got a few more days of pain. Okay, man. Well, take care. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bye-bye. Boney. Cheers. Thank you. Bye. Bye. Hey, this is Boney James, and you are listening to the fantastic Sound Fusion Radio.